Hey everyone, our class is off to an excellent start. It's wonderful to be meeting all of you. I've met most of you now. I'm going to be finishing up the discussion board, the initial tweets, and the What is History discussion this morning. So look for feedback on those things and scores soon. Something that sometimes happens, so I'm just going to mention it here. I'm not sure how widespread it is this time around. Um, but every now and then people forget to use the course hashtag for Twitter. And if that's the case, I probably won't find you there. So if you end up getting a 0 on the Unit 1 reading tweets, the sharing a primary and secondary source and tweeting about those, if you get a 0 on that, that might just mean that I haven't yet found you on Twitter. And you just need to either mention me on Twitter, it's at CNMBrandon, or you can send me an email that includes your Twitter handle, your username, so that I can find you there. So that's just something to keep in mind as we move forward here. Also, I'm here on the timeline because a few of us have gotten started. It looks excellent. So far, so good. Something I wanted to point out is that when you get on the timeline, because people have now claimed their topics, right? You need to make sure not to delete anyone else's work. So this is just a reminder to be super careful when you get onto the timeline. So remember, you'll be using the admin button here to access the features that will let you add entries to the timeline once you've logged in, of course. If you have any questions about how to log in, about how to add an entry, about how to add images or links to your outside source, please watch the video tutorial for the timeline assignment. That's available in the timeline tab in Blackboard in the course content menu. So if you haven't done that yet, please do that as you get started with this assignment. Even if you feel like this thing is pretty intuitive, which it can be, it's still a good idea to give that a look, especially if you find that your image doesn't display correctly. For example, here we have Leah's, and I'm not yet sure who did Cabeza de Vaca, but the images are there correctly, so that is very good. Okay, so when you go on here, you're in the admin box. Be sure not to alter anyone else's entries, but instead click Create New Story. And then that will give you this blank slate where you can put in your topic, the time frame, your name, etc. I'm going to cancel that because I don't need to have a new story on there. I do want to point out whoever created Cabeza de Vaca entry, it looks like it's posted at 1161 AD. He lived not in 1161, he lived in the, I think he was born, I'll have to look this up to be exact, but he was definitely born late 1400s, lived to the mid 1500s. So please do double check the dates that you use. As I pointed out in the timeline tutorial, it's up to you which dates you use. So for Cabeza de Vaca, for example, you could choose his birth date, his year of birth, or you could choose the year that he went on the Nevares expedition, where he and, well, it ended up being only 3 others, but there were more initially with him and his group, were shipwrecked, lost, and wandered through much of what is today the Southwest and northern Mexico. Along the way, of course, having to rely on indigenous peoples and forging very different types of relationships with indigenous peoples than most Spanish explorers did. So he's an interesting figure in that regard, and so it's important for us to think about why. Why was it different for him? What were the conditions that allowed him to think about and see indigenous peoples differently? Also, we're going to be learning about Esteban. I've referred to him as Estebanico in the text. I'm meaning to update that because Esteban is the more proper term for his name. He was a slave from northern Africa. So he was a black man who was along with this expedition as a slave. And so that's also in terms of the dynamics, in terms of social hierarchies, in terms of forced and coerced labor, how Spaniards thought about those things, and how they saw other groups of people and how others were trying to push for their own autonomy, their own rights, their own space in this world of the Southwest and New Mexico. All of those things come together in the story of Cabeza de Vaca. So it's a very cool one. I'm very glad to see it on here. Of course, Chaco Canyon and Juan de Oñate, also super important to early New Mexico history. So great initial choices. Please put on a placeholder as soon as you have a topic that you would like to do. Remember, you can't double up on topics, so if you can't do Chaco Canyon, Juan de Oñate, excuse me, or Cabeza de Vaca. That said, you can do the Navarrez expedition that Cabeza de Vaca was part of. He was a treasurer. You can do the Acoma Rebellion, revolts, or the Battle of Acoma, depending on perspective, again, as we read about. Juan de Oñate, of course, became very involved in that, but that's a separate entry than just doing another entry on Oñate. So my point there is to say that if you're interested in one of these that have already been posted, you can find something that's directly relevant or that directly relates to that. That also might provide avenues, or not might, but it will provide avenues for you to complete your connection steps. So just some things to keep in mind as we move forward with Unit 2. Keep up the great work. Keep asking questions whenever you have them. And I hope you're having a great Wednesday.